This is the Tall Mike Wine Podcast, and I'm Tall Mike Wine, your host. I just returned from a few weeks away. If you've been listening and or following along on Instagram, you know I headed to the Pacific Northwest on a road trip. I drove and drove through the far northern reaches of California and beyond to do some tasting and chatting in Oregon and Washington. I'm back now, but I wanted to share a conversation I had up in the Willamette Valley. It's a little different than what I normally do here on the podcast, where the conversations are with people who are well on their way into their wine journeys. But how do those journeys begin? For example, if you were to decide you wanted to become a winemaker or work in a winery in some production capacity, where would you start? Well, going to school is a good option, and there are winemaking schools. I visited one in Oregon and talked to an instructor and a couple of students. One of the students has even gotten her own wine brand up and running. The school I visited is in Salem, about an hour's drive south of Portland, Chemeketa Community College at the southern end of the Willamette Valley. I spoke first with instructor Brian Behringer. Brian, I have to ask you, your last name looks a lot like a very famous wine name from down around my neck of the woods in California. Do we pronounce it the same?
Yeah, it's the same. It's Behringer, although absolutely no relation at all.
Well, you have because that's a German family, Behringer, and your name kind of looks like it has a little bit of a French flair to it, Behringer.
I think it's Spanish.
Really?
In origin.
Okay. Pronounce it for me as you would in Spain, then.
To be honest, I think it's just Behringer. I'm not genetically, I'm not Spanish. I'm adopted, so.
Oh, so you really don't.
So I'm really far out of it. Yeah.
All right. Well, if you don't know anything about that, let's talk about wine. Something I am told you know some things about.
A little bit.
Tell me what you do here at Chemeketa.
Right. So yeah, this is Chemeketa, which is a community college down here in Salem. Where we're sitting here, this is the Wine Studies Center. Mm-hmm. So this is focused on 2 degrees. One is vineyard management and one is winemaking.
Okay.
As well. There's also a third hospitality degree here as well. But our role here is to help train the workforce of the people who are going to come and work in the Oregon wine industry in the Willamette Valley. So we're very Willamette Valley focused in terms of what we're doing, right? So winemaking is focused, around the cool climate varieties, especially Pinot Noir. Our vineyard is structured that way as well.
Yes, you have your very own vineyard. It's how big?
So the whole property is about 50 acres, okay. And the vineyard itself is just vines, about 8.5.
And what do you have planted there?
Too many things for 8.5 acres. We have a lot of variety of things that are commonly grown here. Pinot Noir, of course, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay. Those are the main ones. We have some Riesling. We have some Pinot Blanc, some Gamay, Sauvignon Blanc. And then some less common things like Tempranillo. We have some Zweigelt as well. And we have Vermentino. It's a few rows of Vermentino.
A lot of different things to play with then.
Even get a little bit more technical, we have several different clones of Pinot Noir and several different rootstocks.
What are the clones? How many acres of Pinot do you have, and then what are the clones?
Of the 8.5 acres, about 4 is Pinot, mm-hmm. And it's broken up into, we have Pommard, we have Wädenswil, 115, 667, 777. All these numbers that people are probably thinking, what is he talking about?
That's why I say the wine podcast that's not all about wine, because we talk about that kind of stuff a little bit. Then we move on. We say, so Brian, where are you from originally, and how did you end up here?
I'm originally from North Carolina. I ended up here in a very roundabout.
Which part of North Carolina?
Just outside of Raleigh. I was from a small town there.
Okay. Okay, so you were kind of a rural kid then growing up?
Yeah, a lot of tobacco, a lot of summers baling hay and doing those.
So this whole farm thing kind of goes back a ways for you then?
Yeah.
Agriculture?
Agriculture. Half of wine is agriculture. Or I would even say, could even argue more than half.
I think it's mostly agriculture, really.
Yeah.
All that fancy stuff you do in the winery, well, that's just some science you throw in. Where did you go after that was a good springboard to getting you here?
Man, that's a hard question. So, yeah, I worked
I asked the hard questions.
For a while in international development all over the place. And in South America and Asia and Latin America, working with farmers from grants from the European government Then I decided to change. I went and studied in France and Germany, and stayed and worked in France and Germany for a few years before deciding to come back to the U.S.
And this was France and Germany, and you're working on grape farms.
Yes, this is grape farm.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So what got you out here to the Willamette Valley then?
This whole process I'm talking about, that was about 20 years that I went through. And
okay.
In those 20 years, I met quite a few people from Oregon who just told me constantly how awesome Oregon was. And I'd never been here, so I thought, well,
it's on the other side of the country from where you grew up.
Check it out.
The West Coast. Yeah. How exotic.
Yeah, I mean, I'd actually been on the West Coast. I was in San Diego working for a very large pharmaceutical company just after college.
Were you farming the pharmaceuticals?
No, I was just in a lab. I was farming cells.
Okay. So then, how did you get here?
Actually, there's a giant wine fair in Europe called ProVine. It's in Dusseldorf. If you want to know how big the wine world is, you could go there because it's a big, about 2-3 day wine expo, and to walk across it takes about an hour. And that's how you realize how
and people from all over the world then. It's an international scope.
Yeah. From Patagonia up to that area just north of Beijing. So basically everybody.
Okay.
I had some Oregon Pinot Noirs there, and they kind of blew me away, plus hearing how great Oregon was. I was thinking about moving back to the U.S., and this was a place that I thought this might be a good fit as well. And so I saw a job advertisement for faculty at a community college, and I applied. I got called for an interview. So I came and I spent, 4 or 5 days in the area just checking it out after my interview.
What time of year was it when you were driving around looking at the place?
It was winter.
Okay.
It was like this.
I was going to say, is it as wet and rainy as it is today?
I was coming from the Mosel. It was like that there.
Okay.
Too.
So then you decided to pack a bag and move here.
Yeah. So then I packed up, I left Germany and came here.
Is it a 2-year program here?
There's both a 1 and a 2-year option.
Okay.
So in the vineyard, you can be a 1-year certificate, or you can do a 2-year associate degree. In the winemaking, it's a 2-year associate degree. It's a super hands-on degree. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're making wine, running labs, filtering, bottling. On the winemaking side and the vineyard side, you're starting at pruning, you're ending at harvest, and even post-harvest with cover crops, fixing posts, all those things that are required for a vineyard. We're an educational institution, but we're also an estate, vineyard, and winery.
Yes, we're sitting here in a room just adjacent to the tasting room.
Yeah, exactly. And the tasting room is often managed by students.
So tell me about the students. Are they mostly from Oregon?
We've got a huge range of people. Some people move across the country. Some are from the Willamette Valley here. And we've even had some students drive all the way up from Southern Oregon, like 4 or 5 hours to come to class. I know that there was a bigger program in Umpqua. At least when I arrived here, I was told it was closed. Outside of that, and Walla Walla. Mm-hmm. These are the only 2 community colleges in the Northwest where you can do the winemaking and the farming.
Yeah, and the one from Walla Walla has a pretty good track record as far as people graduating and starting their own wineries, or at least getting work.
I would say of our students, all of them who want a job will have one before they graduate. There's a big demand here, and a lot of people here went through this program. This program is coming on 25 years, and yeah, a lot of vineyard managers, a lot of winemakers or cellar hands have been through this program here.
So if anybody is an aspiring winemaker and has an idea about coming here, what's the best way to do it?
The process is pretty simple, actually. You just apply and you get in. We don't have any prerequisites to enroll. There are to take some classes. There's a math class and a chemistry class. It's pretty much open to anyone who wants to.
A little bit of math, a little bit of chemistry. It's not all art, kids. It's a little bit of science.
Yeah, you do have to count and multiply and divide and make solutions.
So do the neighboring wineries, I mean, there's, 700 wineries around you or more. Do they come visit? Do they get involved?
I wouldn't say they would come here. We go there.
Even better.
On the vineyard side and on the winery side, we have our very small 8.5 acre vineyard plus the small winery here, but there's a lot of people doing things differently in all sorts of ways, right? There's no one correct way to do anything. We go out and we visit all these places around the vineyards and the wineries. We're in here. It's called Career Technical Education. We have advisory boards here. These are people who are meant to tell us if we're still relevant in terms of what we're teaching, right? Kind of guide us. And a lot of the people who started the wine industry here are on our board.
All right. Well, that's Brian Behringer. No relation. Thanks for hanging out, Brian.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. You run the program. Give me your official title.
My official title is Viticulture Instructor and Program Chair for Viticulture.
Program Chair.
Yeah. Program Chair of one person.
We're going to talk to one of your students now. You want to pass the microphone over? All right, we're talking to Heather now. Heather Anderson. Heather, from where do you hail?
I'm from Silverton, Oregon, originally.
So you're from here in Oregon?
In the Willamette Valley.
Oh, my God.
Yes. Born and raised.
Were you from a wine family?
No, not. And Silverton is rural. There's lots of agriculture there, but we weren't, agriculture was not part of our family.
Not your family.
Yeah. No, my husband grew up with farming families, but he has never farmed either. So this was a departure for both of us.
All right. What got you excited about wine and making wine and actually enrolling in the program here?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. We both wanted to move back to this area because my husband's family is in Salem as well. And
moved back to the area.
We were in St. Helens, Oregon at the time.
So you were still in Oregon.
Still in Oregon. Yeah. Most of my life has been in Oregon. There have been a few blips, Hawaii, Chicago, but most of the rest.
You say that with almost like a Chicago accent.
Chicago dogs. Yeah. Yes, we were up on the one of the most northwest parts of Oregon, so in St. Helens, Oregon, and wanted to move closer to our families. Okay. I got a job in the school district, the Silver Falls School District, and it's like, okay, well, let's find a place down there. And we couldn't really find anything. And we saw this vineyard for sale. It's 4 acres of planted vines, which seemed like a nice, way to jump into things. But the farm itself is a tad bit bigger, 65 acres altogether.
Wait, so you got a job with the school district?
Got a job with the school district.
And then you saw a vineyard for sale.
Then we saw a vineyard for sale.
This sounds like the start of something that could be disastrous.
It could be. There's books written about, starting these kinds of adventures.
Because people get very romantic when they see a vineyard, right?
Yes.
This romantic, like, well, we're going to have a winery and a vineyard, but it's a lot of hard work and a lot of money.
Well, Kevin wanted to start a distillery, actually. So we were originally looking for land to put a distillery on. And winemaking is not distilling, but it is in the realm of alcohol production. And so we're thinking, well, that would be a fun adventure. We were ready for something different.
So you bought the vineyard.
Bought the vineyard.
And the farm.
And the farm. We bought the farm. We bought the farm.
I'm glad you said it.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you decided you needed to get some schooling.
Well, yeah. We needed to know what we were doing. Sure. So Kevin was taking viticulture classes before harvest even started or anything. So he was getting on board with that. And I was thinking, well, it might be good to take some winemaking classes too, so we know what to do with once we have our grapes.
Yes.
I knew that there was a program here at Chemeketa and applied and got in.
Congratulations.
Yeah. It's very rigorous. It was a very rigorous selection process, right, Brian? The prerequisites, are not always the as exciting as the production, but I'm in the winemaking side, and the production has been just a ton of fun this year.
What are the prerequisites that are like, maybe not so much fun?
Well,
or just tedious?
Chemistry.
Oh, okay.
That I wouldn't say was fun.
But when you're studying chemistry and they can somehow tie it in with this is how this works in relation to making wine.
Yeah. Well, they didn't do it in that class, but it was really interesting. It was interesting. It was just really hard. And it had been a few decades since I had chemistry.
Okay. So you were a little rusty as a student.
A little rusty, yeah.
Okay.
But it was, and even though it was hard, I mean, I had friends in there. And so that made it a little bit, misery loves company. So it made it a little bit better. And then now we've got the science of winemaking, which I wouldn't say is tedious. It's hard. It's very, very hard. But that is more specific to winemaking and tying things together. And so it's fascinating, all of the bits that are involved in the winemaking process. And we've also gotten to take a lot of tasting classes, which has been really fun for me because I've always enjoyed wine, but I wouldn't be able to pick things out.
Right. So you enjoyed wine up to the point where you got excited and bought the farm.
Exactly.
Would you characterize yourself just sort of a casual wine drinker at that point?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Very casual. In fact, when I would go places to taste wine and they're like, what do you taste? It would be like, oh, brother. And now it's like, oh, no, I can, I've had practice with instructors and it's like, oh, I can taste some of those things.
That is one of the most intimidating parts about the whole world of wine. I manage a tasting room at a small winery in Sonoma, and so many people roll in and, they'll hear somebody saying, oh, I get a little cherry on this, a little raspberry. And somebody, how do you do that? I can't do that. But I tell people, I say, it takes time, it takes focus. And the good news is you have to drink a lot of wine.
It's not a problem.
Right? It's all fun.
We can help them with that.
Yeah. It's all fun. Like, it just takes focus, right?
Yeah.
I set up a series of prompts for myself. Let's talk about fruit. Let's talk about earth. Let's talk about wood. Let's remember that there might be a floral component. When I'm tasting wine, I always forget, think about flowers.
That's a good idea. I forget about flowers, too.
I forget about flowers. And then if you start thinking about flowers, it's like, oh, yeah, it kind of smells flowery to a certain degree. Yeah. How do you go about doing it?
In class, we use the WSET standards. And
WSET level 2, right?
Yeah, yeah, excellent.
Thank you.
So, we kind of go through that. We go with, through the appearance, the nose, the palate. And so go through all of those pieces. And then also I am constantly looking at my sheet of what possibilities are.
Yes.
Because I might be able to taste something, but I can't put my finger on it.
Right.
And so sometimes looking through, it's like, oh, that's
right.
what
It's
it
good to
is.
have it might be this, it might be this, it might be this. What about, have you considered this?
And it's nice to hear other people. So then we go around and people share what they are tasting and smelling in the wine. And so sometimes if I wasn't able to put my finger on it, someone else has. It's like, oh.
So what do you have growing over there on the farm?
We have in our small 4 acres, we have, of course, Pinot is the majority of what we have. We also have Tempranillo, Gamay, Marechal Foch, Dolcetto. And then we have 3 whites that we field blend together
into
our white
acres?
blend in just 4 acres. In just 4 acres, we've got Viognier, Müller-Thurgau, and Gruner Veltliner.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now, is the wine we're sipping, is this from your farm?
Yes, these are estate-grown grapes. This is our very first vintage, harvested last year, 2023.
Okay. I'm going to put a picture of the bottle on my Instagram feed and a picture of everyone that we're talking to. Tell me, the winery is called, it looks like it Heaven, but it's spelled incorrectly.
It is.
Or it's Heaven.
No. I know that is a lot of people do say that, and I was like, oh, well, we really hope people aren't heaving after they leave here.
I looked at that and thought, it's Heaven, but it's just spelled a little differently with an I-N at the end. Why that name? Tell me about it.
So my name is Heather.
Okay.
And my husband's name is Kevin.
Okay.
And so we've smushed our names together to make Heaven.
It's like a Bennifer kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So my family calls us Heaven. Also, it's fortuitous that, the vin at the end is also French for wine.
Oui,
and
oui.
so that is why it is lowercase except for the uppercase V in the middle.
The big, beautiful golden V.
Yeah. And then my nephew actually helped us design the logo for his high school class that was approved by his teacher.
Hey.
He helped design the logo. We have tweaked it a little. And then also the label, he did a lot of work on that too.
That's great.
So
is that
he did
a
nice
picture
job.
of the farm kind of superimposed on the back there?
Yes, that is our farmhouse that we are living in.
Okay.
It is 1905 is the earliest records they have of it, but at the time they weren't really keeping track of when buildings were built, so it's likely older than that.
Wow.
But it has been renovated. The people who lived there before did a beautiful job renovating it.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So you have the farm, the house, and how much of this Heaven Pinot Noir did you make?
We have 5 full pallets of Pinot.
So a couple hundred cases?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we've got more cases of, we have a lot of Tempranillo. Did I say Tempranillo before?
You did.
Yes, we have a lot of Tempranillo as well. Our Tempranillo does really well. And then just smaller amounts of Gamay. We don't have as much Gamay or Dolcetto or Marechal Foch. So
your winery encompasses all of those different varietals then?
Yes.
So you've made a lot of wine?
Yes.
A lot of different kinds of wines?
Yeah.
Do you pour them for people?
Our tasting room will open in May 16th, 2025.
Okay.
So we'll be open for the season next year.
On the farm?
On the farm. But we do have a website with our wines for sale right now, and that's heavenestate.com.
Heaven Estates, that's Heavin.
Yes.
It's funny, we talked about how small 4 acres seemed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you say, we have all this wine, because it's really amazing how much you can make just from an acre or two. And then it's fun to think about making wine. It's fun to think about owning a winery. But at the end of the day, eventually you're going to have a lot of wine to sell.
Yep.
How does that feel?
Intimidating. Fortunately, we've got a lot of opportunity to connect with people in the industry in our classes, and then also we're part of the Cascade Foothills Wine Growers Association. We talk with folks in the area about strategies for all of that. So it doesn't really feel like we're doing this by ourselves.
Okay.
I think like what Brian was saying about community, it's very much alive here, and so that's a really nice piece.
Well, this wine, the word that keeps popping into my head as I'm sipping it, we've been sipping this wine for the whole time we've been talking. The word that pops into my head is fresh. It's very fresh. Got really nice raspberry fruit in here, some cherry. Yeah, it's lovely.
Thank you.
All right. Heaven Estates, Estate Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley, 2023. And now in the hot seat here in the fancy boardroom. It's the fancy boardroom, right?
Very fancy.
The important room where important things happen at
Quite right.
Chemeketa Community College. I'm talking to Christine Kennedy, who is not only a longtime friend of mine, but a student here. When did you enroll?
2023.
Okay, just last year.
I'm very fresh, just like Heather's wine.
Just like the wine, fresh and fruity.
I'm a little bit fruit forward.
So tell me what happened in your life where you all of a sudden decided you were going to go to Oregon and study winemaking.
A couple different things. So my mother's Chilean, and I grew up with wine. Even as a child, we'd have like a little bit of wine with dinner, and it was not a party thing. It was like a cultural...
It's part of the meal.
Exactly.
It's part of... There are parts of the world where the food comes out, the wine comes out. And It's not like we're going to sit and drink several bottles. We're going to have a glass or two with the meal. It's part of the food.
And as a child, it was an extremely small amount. And my mother would always say, don't get drunk. That was like her. And,
as a child, you're like, what's drunk? I don't understand what you're talking about.
Well, yeah. And what was great is there was no kind of stigma about it. And so it wasn't something I thought a lot about. It was just kind of like a thing with dinner. And then with church, I was raised Catholic.
Okay.
So there's always been kind of a love of it in some way. And I lived in Sonoma County, which is how I knew you. And certainly there is some good wine there.
There's some wine there.
For example, I lived in Sebastopol and
Russian River Valley.
Russian River Valley had so many wonderful places, but also like there was a cuvee I remember drinking of sparkling wine in Sonoma County at Iron Horse, the rolling hills, having that cuvee that presidents had drank at signing of different peace accords and things like that. It was just...
So wine was imprinted on you.
Illuminating.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'll say when I got here, I was thinking about this too. I have a friend named Marshall Howder, and he was helping do the last harvest with his girlfriend Ingrid at a winery that was like closing down. So I got to go behind the scenes. James Cassidy, who is actually a soil scientist at OSU, happened to be there helping consult with his wife, Nina. He is an interesting fellow because, do you know a band called Information Society?
I do not.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
Pure Energy.
Oh, okay. They were one of those one-hit wonders, right?
They were like a big band when I was in high school, and he happens to now be a soil scientist here.
Wait, the guy from the Pure Energy band?
Yes. And
is a soil scientist in the Willamette Valley. But you didn't explain how you ended up here to be with them.
I'm almost there. So
okay.
I was
I don't
hanging
mean
out.
here at the school, but here in Willamette Valley.
Let's just say it was a change of life.
Okay.
which you know more about than our listeners will. And so it'll have a little mystery to it. We like a little mystery.
Mystery.
But they were hanging out consulting. So, and, I find out he's from Information Society. It's like kind of just trippy, right? You're sitting there behind the scenes. There's a woman from Australia in the room. That also helped. She's like crushing grapes with her feet.
Right.
They're running the hoses. I'm just like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to see wine being made and being a part of it. And then I started looking into schools and ended up here. So a little bit of a journey.
But just like with Heather, there's a vineyard for sale. You start running this little movie in your head about, what would that be? What would that be like, right?
Yeah. And I think, what about you? Like, I feel like there's this thing about the allure of the barrels. There's the beauty, like it just never gets old. The smells of it, the tactile parts, the science, like Heather was talking about. She was like one of my lifelines in chemistry. We actually studied general bio and organic in 10 weeks. And my sister's a biochemist, and she was not taking my calls at that point. That being said, it was really forging in the fire, and it was so interesting. And something I realized is, as Heather and I talk about sometimes too, is like we read these very thick books of all the science around what's going on in the process, but really there's so much going on that you change a little thing here, you change a little thing there, your whole chemistry is changed, and it's not something that is totally easy. You can't just go, well, if you do 70 degrees, you do cold soak, heat it up to 70, throw in this yeast, you throw in that, you do the mallow temp, and then you just do it that, you're going to be good. It's never like that. Every vintage is different, as we all know, right?
Yes.
So, and to me, that's magic. Like, I love it's almost like the whole body with all its complications are in that process. And I think it's gorgeous.
Back to your point about how there's this thing with the barrels. I also think there's a thing with the very specific equipment that is used. When you walk into a wine room, a winery facility, and you see all of the industrial things that are in there, you're sort of like, ooh, I want to play. And I think that goes back to like childhood. Like Tonka trucks, things like that.
For me, I realized this is something I can study the rest of my life and never totally know, and also have to count on the alchemy of each vintage and whether or not we can work with that in a way that makes it good or at least palatable to most people. There's something that we say in our tasting group at school, which is if we don't like it, we just call it acceptable. And so we're trying to get up to premium, right? Like something that like people really desire. And I think there's a lot of, can I put my own hand in that and contribute to this collaboration with all the other people that have worked together to make it? And for me, that's really special. I wanted to tell you a couple things from counting, like kind of riffing off what I've heard here today.
Okay.
Something that was very cool with Brian's class is we got to go to Argyle's Lone Star Vineyard, which there's big sparkling wine company.
Argyle is one of the early sparkling wine producers, and now one of the biggest. And
exactly.
Big name.
A big Oregon name. What I will say about that is, there was a woman vineyard manager. For me, that's still just awesome to see, because for winemakers, the statistics I've seen is about 15 to 18% are women.
That sounds about right.
How cool to see someone like that. What I got out of her was, and I think this is true of Heather and Brian, and like we're all a bit adventurous. Like there is something where you have to go, okay, like this is what's known about what's been working in the valley, but this is a specific spot. Like what if we tried this crazy thing? There's like a risk involved. And I think managing that to where you're always excelling, but also no one wants to be fired from this, very vulnerable position of like covering the year's
but something in
cases.
Your head is pushing you to do something a little different, right?
I think that's where the artistry and if you feel like you might be able to creatively contribute, you also admire so many people that contribute. And, that's why it was really fun to have a talk here with Heather, who's someone I admire. And, it's going to be fun to see and listen to some of your upcoming episodes.
So let me ask you, we talked with Heather about her and Kevin buying a farm and having this idea. So she's here to service that dream. What's your dream?
That's a line I think I've heard in a movie before. Well, here's what I would say. I dream a lot about traveling, and I think wine for me, like we talked about, there's a lot of culture, and I love partaking in different cultures. So I hope to go, right now, France, okay? France,
Okay,
working towards France every day.
Which part of France?
Since I'm working, we'll, talk a little bit another time about, but since I'm working at Domaine Drouin, which is a French-owned company, I dream of Beaune and going in to see their tasting room there. So it's a nice dream to have because I work with them and get to learn so much about them. So you kind of anticipate a lot of like how amazing it'll be to see some of their cellars date back to 200 AD.
No, the old world of wine is truly that. It's an old world.
Yeah, and that's exciting to me. So I think all of those kind of connections, but I hope to also make it to Chile, where my mother's from.
The old country.
Yeah.
Very nice.
The homeland, if you will. Yeah. And Heather actually teases me because we're working. I wanted to tell you the other thing that was kind of really exciting right now is we're making Pinot Noir, of course, because as we talked about, that's basically Oregon in a nutshell.
That's what you do here. That's what you do here.
That's what works beautifully here with the weather up here in the northern part of Oregon. But we're also making Pinot Gris, Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon, Rosé, and Riesling. And also, this school is known for an annual Gamay Nouveau party, which Heather and I are both working on that right now. But she always teases me that the Malbec is my people's wine. And I love that. And I do, I know it's from other places, and it's definitely Argentina is known for it as well. I love that connection.
It's your
kind of what I'm getting
people's next door neighbor's wine.
Yeah, and we share it. We've been making Malbec in Chile for a while, so I love that.
So back to the original question, your near-term dream is France.
France, and I do hope to be an associate or assistant winemaker when I graduate. So I'm very much working hard on those labs that Heather was mentioning earlier. Those are extremely important to me.
Get good grades. Make us proud.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
A conversation recorded recently at Chemeketa Community College in Salem, Oregon, with winemaking students Christine Kennedy, Heather Anderson, and instructor Brian Behringer. Chemeketa is a word meaning gathering place in the Kalapuya language. The Kalapuya were the earlier inhabitants of what is now the Willamette Valley in Oregon. For more information on the college, click the link in the show notes. The Tall Mike Wine Podcast was conceived and is written, produced, edited, and maintained by yours truly. For a peek behind the scenes, follow me on Instagram at Tall Mike Wine. If you have a question or any type of feedback, drop me an email to tallmikewine@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure you're subscribed on whichever podcast app you use. You can also become a sponsor to help keep the podcast commercial free. Just click the Support the Show link in the show notes or go to tallmikewine.com. I really appreciate you finding the show. And I'll be back with more conversations, more wine, and more fun. For now, this is Mike Stone, a.k.a. Tall Mike Wine. Keep swirling, keep sniffing, keep sipping. Cheers.